Hello, and thank you for joining us for Career Conversations. Today, I'm here with Joanna Hoffschneider, and she is, look, I have to practice this name. She's giggling at me. I didn't want to butcher it. It's important to me to get that correct. She is the founder of Resolute Consulting, and I'm so excited to talk to her about her career journey and how she became the founder of this awesome company. So, welcome, Joanna.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. You and I have had some funny conversations about names over the months. So it's always interesting. And there's that moment where you second guess it and freeze.
And that's just what I was like, no, did I?
You rocked it. You rocked it.
Thank you. Thank you. So my style is like, I like to get right into things. So we're going to start with the first question. And my first question is, what does your family think you do when you tell them you're a founder of Resolute Consulting?
So it's a wonderful question, and it really made me laugh because I have a very specific answer. So the first is when I first handed my parents my business card after starting the company, my father said, "Founder." Only an American would choose that, which just made me laugh because I think it really speaks to the prevalence of sort of startup culture and the entrepreneurial spirit in the States. I'm English, perhaps obviously from the accent, but I've lived in America for a very long time. And I think there is something very unique about the specificity and the vagueness of that title. The second part of my answer, I think, speaks to how our families can be tremendous cheerleaders for us, even when they don't have a clue what we do. I was immensely privileged about 6 months into starting the business that I got an award from SMPS, an organization that's near and dear to both of us, the Society for Marketing Professional Services. And the DC chapter has this wonderful Golden Tuber award. It's fantastic. And I was not anticipating this. I went off to the annual awards ceremony, as I've done each year for many, many, many years. And to my tearful delight and surprise was the recipient of this award, which means, amongst other things, you get a tuba, a real tuba on a plinth that comes back to the
Oh, that's so cool.
with you. It was fantastic. And friends told my parents about it, and I think my dad's response nailed it. "We have no idea what Joanna does, but we're really glad people think she's good at it."
Oh, that's so sweet. Like that support is magical.
Absolutely. It means the world. But I think there are ways in which it's really important in business that people understand what we do because they can vouch for us. They can be our advocates and allies. They can hire us. They can get us hired. But we can also have genuine reinforcement and coaching and help from people who don't understand what we do, but are really invested in our success. So my family doesn't have a clue. They think it's cool, but they have no idea. The parts of it that are easiest for them to relate to, probably in this order. I do a lot of training and teaching, and my first career, which I know we'll get into this, but my first career was as a teacher. So they understand that part. Joanna used to teach people English. Now she teaches people business. They get that. They understand the coaching piece of what I do because I never met something I didn't have an opinion about. I'm very curious. I like unpicking things and putting them back together. So that coaching piece, they see that very much as part of who I am. The part that's the most puzzling for them is the consulting bucket. Because it is the most variable. It is the other duties as assigned piece. And something that I think is really important, I know we'll unpack this. I'm a solopreneur. I love being a solopreneur. I'm not trying to build an empire. And so that piece of you want to build a company that is better each year, stronger each year, but that doesn't necessarily translate into dozens and hundreds and thousands of employees. I'm a founder of my own business, but I don't want to build an empire.
Wow, that's interesting as so many people in the startup culture, like how fast can we go? Do we get, venture capital? Like how do we grow this? So that's an interesting perspective. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you actually do. You mentioned you have kind of three buckets: you're teaching, you're coaching, and then the third bucket, which is consulting, which is kind of the whatever needs to get done sort of bucket. Can you tell me a little bit more about each of these?
Sure. So I'm going to start with the easiest one, at least from my family's perspective. So my first career was teaching and training. I grew up primarily in the Far East, mostly in Hong Kong. And I'm incredibly fortunate to have parents that believe if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. So I have a degree in English literature with a minor in sociology, guaranteed full employment plan. I was very, very fortunate to be able to study subjects that I loved and found interesting and that taught me to think and to write and to analyze, incredibly important skills to take to the workforce, but that don't necessarily have and therefore you will be a
Doctor or a lawyer. It's a little different.
Exactly. It's very, very different. And I graduated in the early 90s, living in Hong Kong, having gone to university in England. And for the small amount of your audience who are students of Far East history, Hong Kong went back to China in 1997, having been a British colony for over 100 years.
Wow.
And the handover treaty had been signed, but there was still many years to execution. There was a huge appetite for learning English. It was definitely a school of thought that says, I speak English, therefore I can teach English. And that wasn't really my school of thought and certainly wasn't my parents'. So I went on and did a postgraduate certificate in teaching English as a foreign language. I never knew I wanted to be a teacher.
Oh, yeah?
The first time I stood at the front of the classroom, I loved it. And I was good at it. And if you had told me that 20, 25 years later, a key differentiator in my skill set was going to be formal education as a teacher, I would have laughed. But I've always been fascinated by professional development. I tend to still be learning something myself. And I've brought that teaching mindset through my whole career. So now with Resolute, I teach training programs. I teach in-house for companies. I teach open programs where people can essentially buy a slot in a training program. And I do a lot of teaching and training for professional associations. Those things that we call soft skills in such a dismissive way that are really vital for business success. Communications, persuasion, pitching yourself and your company, time management, presentation, all those sorts of things.
They're so critical and we use them more than we ever pay any attention to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we often get to that place in our career where we're promoted and someone says, congratulations, go figure it out.
Exactly.
And we don't think about the skills building. So I love being part of that skills building. So that's the teaching and training piece. It's been really vital in the last year because as a trainer who's actually a trained teacher, I write curriculum, I write learning objectives. I think about, how am I going to slice and dice this group? I manage the classroom. Once we shifted to COVID and virtual programming, this sense of having a trainer who's actually trained as a teacher became a differentiator I never would have anticipated. Because I write learning objectives, I think about curriculum, I think about that trajectory in a very different way than someone who's been a practitioner but never a teacher would. So that's been really fun. I get to bring that first love back into my current business.
That is a huge differentiator. I never really would have thought about either. Because of COVID, everything has been virtual. And so you have to take a certain kind of approach to understanding how your audience learns, even if you aren't face to face. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been really neat. So then I do a lot of coaching work. And this varies from one-to-one executive leadership coaching, which is a sizable commitment of resources. Now,
Yes.
we often use sizable commitment of resources as like code words for really expensive. It's an investment. But the piece that people don't think about is coachability.
Yes.
So I often end up having a lot of preliminary conversations with people about like, yeah, are you actually willing to change?
That part is so critical. If you're not coachable, you can spend all the money in the world and still have zero results.
Yes. If you're not willing to change and if you can't invest the time. I did some coaching last year myself. It was a sizable investment of resources. And I joke, I've said this to the coach with whom I worked, like, it's the most important thing I've hated in a few years.
Oh, wow. The most important thing you've hated. Share more about this, please.
It was incredibly uncomfortable. It challenged my complacencies in some ways.
Wow.
It challenged me to unpack, what are you really good at? What have you decided you're good at? Because it's part of your brand, it's part of your identity, but you haven't really unpacked it. And where are you willing to change?
Oh.
These were not comfortable conversations in my head.
Yeah.
And because they were uncomfortable, that's why we need coaches. Because if you're doing something all by yourself and it's uncomfortable, you stop doing it.
Yeah, that's a normal human thing. You're like, okay, back away because
Yeah.
this is insanity. Like no
Yeah.
one's touching the stove for the third time or the second time.
Exactly. I don't like this. This is hard. I'm going to stop. But then you get to, I don't like this. This is hard. I wrote a really big check and I have to look someone that I respect in the virtual eyeball on Wednesday. Oh, I guess I'm going to do this work. And it made me better at what I do. It made my business stronger and more sustainable. And I would encourage all of your viewers and listeners to think about this. If you never sit on your client's side of the table, how much empathy and understanding can you bring to those conversations?
I think people greatly undervalue empathy and understanding. I actually took a LinkedIn learning course this weekend
I saw that.
in empathy because it's so important to like have that when you're working with coworkers, whether you're, a consultant or, a team leader, or like you really need to kind of understand what's going on in people's worlds. And like you said, rather than being angry that it's 2 hours late, hey, perhaps there's some things that you aren't aware of that are the reason, kind of offer that compassion to people and going, look, I got your back. Let's communicate with me. Let me know what you need. How can I support you in getting this done?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And I think the balance with that empathy is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where when we have a conversation, I know we're wonderfully off topic here.
Just a little.
Interesting. When we bring empathy without accountability, it can feel like a free pass. And I think that's where managers push back. I think that's where leaders push back. I think we're going to see a lot of pushback as we go back to the office.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Yeah, this is a business. We're here to perform. We're dialing down the empathy because accountability conversations are hard. Accountability conversations are scary. But empathy without accountability is really tough on a business. Mm-hmm. So having the courage to have those accountability conversations as well, for me, is a vital part of the coaching process. You asked about 3 buckets. The third one, the most interesting, confusing, fungible one is the consulting piece.
Okay.
So the consulting that I do through Resolute, there's an easy way to split it. One is ongoing support where a company pays essentially a retainer, and they get ongoing support, accountability, advisory services. We check in at least once a month. I won't take these commitments without a commitment to a monthly meeting, because otherwise it just becomes this thing that drifts in the wind. And I work with people to set priorities and then help them execute on it. The second is the special projects work.
Okay.
So this can be anything from an internal climate survey, how are we doing within our organization, to a client survey, to I do a lot of what I call a step back, where we have a problem that we need to unpack and rebuild. In the move back to the office, for example, I'm working with a lot of marketing teams and leadership teams to step back, think about communication, think about priorities. It's not strategic planning. It's not blue sky in that way, but
Yeah.
it's really how are we going to operate? How are we going to execute? Setting a doable plan in motion. I love that work. It's really kind of fun.
Well, that's good if you enjoy that process. Some people would probably take off running.
No, it's fantastic. And it's one of the treats as a consultant who was in-house for many years. I've sat in that marketing seat. I understand that, yeah, we can set all these priorities, but then that RFP comes in and we have to find a way to combine the strategic and the tactical, to combine the proactive and the reactive in a way that maintains a higher level focus, but also just gets the you-know-what out the door in time for the deadline.
I definitely know what.
Yeah.
So we've talked about your three buckets, about teaching. We've talked about coaching. We've talked about consulting. How did you get into this role? What made you decide to shift from sitting in the marketing seat at a company to starting your own?
So my first career back, as I say to my son, who's 22 now, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and I had my first career, I was a teacher, but I ran my own business. I've always been interested in the business of the business. So I was a solopreneur that became an entrepreneur in my 20s in Hong Kong, fortunate enough never to be told you're too young or you're a girl. I look back at it and I think, wow, this was an opportunity that was so natural for me. It never felt like the incredible opportunity it was. So I built a small business, 7 people. We wrote and delivered training programs and did some consulting work around education issues. I came to the States, had a kid, got a mortgage, needed a real job with an actual, consistent paycheck. And I went in-house for about 16, 17 years. I sort of always knew this was what I was going to do when I grew up. In something that is a very unfashionable thing to say, I am not a good team player.
Wow.
I'm a good team leader. I'm a good go away and do your bit and bring it back together. I love seeing the big picture. I can float up to strategy and down to execution.
Oh, no, we froze for a second.
Oh, no.
I lost you for just a split second. You said you're not good at being a team player. Can we start from there?
Sure. So in what is a very unfashionable thing to say, I am not a good team player. I feel like that's a terrible thing to say when you're in-house. I'm a good team leader. I'm great at taking a piece of a project, but I am not a natural collaborator. So running my own business works for me. And something that always seems a funny thing to say when you have the opportunity like this to sort of be front and center, I am a really strong introvert. I love connecting with you. I've loved every conversation we've had. I love presenting to a large group. I love, as I've said, that teaching and training piece. and I can be very dynamic in the office. I do not like the social, the small talk. There have been parts of the pandemic that I have not hated.
I know a few people who feel the same way. But that's interesting. When did you learn that you were better more of as a leader than as a team player, so to speak? At
Oh,
what moment did
early,
that become clear?
early. Um, my mum says Joanna's very good when she has her hat on. And
Huh.
what she means by that is when I'm playing a role, here I am being whatever, being the cat herder or the presenter or the logistics person, but just showing up and connecting, that's hard for me. That takes a lot of energy for me.
That is
And
so surprising for me, having gotten to know you.
yeah. But when we each reflect on those conversations that we've had, and there have been a number of them, they have been purposeful. They've had a very specific, let's come together to talk about X. So, how did I know I was going to do this? Some of it is I know myself well. I've done a lot of work over the years around self reflection, around EQ, around intentionality, and I know what makes me happy.
Ah,
So then I had two things. Um, we had a tragedy in our family, and for many people, it can be a tragedy. It can be something that makes you realize, if not now, when.
hmm.
And when you know what you want, work towards getting it. If you are in the privileged position of being able to make what you want your day job, the thing that people give you money for, find a way to do that. If you're in a place where it can't be your day job or it can't be your day job yet, then do
Hmm.
what you're doing. Take your passion and make it the extracurricular. It's amazing the energy that you're bringing to this. And we can see from watching the previous episodes and so on that this is something that brings you joy.
Oh, I love it so much. I joke with my husband. I said to him, I said, I have an idea, and this time I'm not going to tell myself no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to commit to 3 episodes, and if I get to three and I'm still not over it, I'll commit to 10. This is the backstory. Nobody knows. So I'll commit to 10. Well, between you and I've done 5, and I'm booked through like July almost already of like conversations. But I'm just enjoying it so much. Like I
Yeah,
was like, I just need a hobby and outlet, something that offers what I can't do it maybe every day, but I don't even know that I would want to do this full time. I just for me, I'm like, it's a gift to be able to say, okay, this is when I'm going to do this, and this is when I'm not. Like this
yeah,
coming weekend, I'm taking a break.
exactly. Because you've brought together your passion and enthusiasm with some intentionality about how to execute. You're a strategic thinker and you figured out what's going to bring me joy here and not pushed it so far that you actually spoil the thing you love, because there's a
Mhm.
real risk of that. So I knew what I wanted. I had the spur that said, do it now. And I had made some couple of decades of fiscal responsibility meant that I had the opportunity to take the risk. My son was away at college. It was sort of just me at that point, and I figured, if it all goes horribly wrong, it's
Mhm.
ramen noodles for one. It's not like I'm putting someone else at risk here. So I leapt. I had what I call hard-earned good luck, and came out to pent-up demand and people who were willing and ready to work with me,
Well, that's
and
amazing.
launched a business. And the next thing you know, it's 3.5 years later and it's a thing, um, which has just been wonderful. So when I told my network this was what I was doing, the very narrow band of reactions went from, well, of course you are, to it's about time.
It was like, what were you waiting for? We've been waiting for you.
I think I was the last person who realized that I was going to do this.
Mhm.
which was really a treat. I mean, so when you told people that you were doing this, was there much surprise?
No, not really for the handful of people I told. I didn't even really make an announcement. I kind of just did it and say, "Hey, you're gonna watch this Saturday." But what I've been overwhelmed by is the level of support. Like friends are like texting me, they're like, "Did I miss it? Tell me where the link." Like they're actively looking for it, and people are engaged. And they're like, one of my girlfriends is like, "I love watching you because you have so much joy when you do this." And so,
So,
and so
I think this is the thing where you bring the passion and the enthusiasm, and you can't fake that.
mhm.
But I loved what you just said about people reaching out, because I think this also speaks to the industry that you're still deeply immersed in, and that I was in for many years, and I'm still sort of 70% in.
Yeah.
Those AEC marketers, that architecture, engineering, construction, commercial real estate world, we are champions and cheerleaders for each other.
Yes.
And we recognize the ways in which the best, most exciting parts of our job are sometimes in the gaps.
Hmm.
And so when you see someone who takes one of those gaps and combines it with their own skill set to make a larger thing, we want to support that.
I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. Thank you for being here and being a part of this process for me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we have talked about how you've decided, it was time for you to start your own business. Everyone had been waiting on you. So you talked about you kind of always knew you wanted to own your own business, but is this really what you wanted to be when you're growing up, or was there something else you wanted to be when you were growing up?
Oh, so what I really wanted to be when I grew up was an archaeologist.
Really?
So this is a funny story that really has the most peculiar how we can fall deeply in love with something, and then how somebody's throwaway comment can change what we want or what we believe is possible for us. So I traveled a lot growing up. My dad's an engineer, and we lived all over the world. So my first memories are the first time we lived in Hong Kong, which is a fascinating mixture of super old and super new. It's a real estate obsessed city.
Hmm.
And my dad's an engineer. We moved there because Hong Kong was building an underground train system. Daddy designed the airflow. As my sister and I used to say, our daddy built the MTR. Like he was
Oh.
down there digging the hole, which maybe we thought is what he was doing. Who knows? We were kids. Um, so I grew up with a very long sense of history. We moved from Hong Kong to Kenya, and I mean, it's the cradle of civilization. We would go on safari, but we would also go to the Old Dubai Gorge. We'd go out to amazing, ancient, archaeologically ancient places.
Wow.
My earliest memory of a topic that I was passionate about, and I just give huge chops to my parents on this. Um, so Robert and Louis Leakey, these names may mean nothing, but they are archaeologists who really did a lot of exploration around the origins of man, and who were based in Nairobi, but did work across East Africa. And it was a lecture series at the university that my mother took me to. I was about 9. I was the only child. I mean, this was like you can stay up past your bedtime kind of things. And I
Oh my.
remember I have 2 vivid memories of this. One is sitting at the back being like fascinated and bewildered all at the same time, because this was university lectures and I was 9. And the other is that we would pick up pizza on the way home. And I remember the smell of pizza in the car. But I was fascinated. We went on to live in Iraq, in Baghdad, for a few years in the early 80s. And we went to Babylon and Nineveh and Mosul, which were amazingly well preserved at the time. This was during what we called the Gulf War, but before Desert Shield and Desert Storm and so on. And now a lot of these antiquities tragically are destroyed, along with huge loss of life. But they were extremely well preserved at the time, and it fed that urge. And then in one of those silly comments that people make that they don't mean to make, so you can see
Mhm.
me sitting here with my glasses on and I've got contact lenses underneath them. Someone said to me, "How will you be an archaeologist? You have really bad eyesight. You need to be able to see properly."
Really?
The silliest throwaway comment. But I figured, oh, I can't do that then. And I've thought about this so much over the years because it doesn't matter that I didn't become an archaeologist. I have a career that I love, but I think about the careless things that we say,
Mhm.
the doors that we close or fail to open for young people because we didn't mean to shut something. We didn't mean to say, this is not for you, but we said it.
Yes.
And for me, it was something as silly as eyesight. And very aware of the time and place in which we're having this conversation at a time where lots of us are really trying to center equity and inclusion in our work and
Mhm.
thinking about the intentionality and how we need to take opportunity. If we're starting to have conversations about opportunity in the workplace,
Mhm.
that's important, but that's late. We need to be having those conversations in grade school. We need to be broadening the possibilities, the places in which people can see themselves early.
As
Because it
early as
closed
possible.
a door for me, but I still had a heck of a lot of open doors. And what if it closed a door for someone who didn't feel like they had a lot of open doors? So archaeology was the first thing I wanted when I grew up. And then, and this is a funnier, less depressing story.
This is exciting still. Like, I had no idea, like, you grew up, like, kind of almost like a little globe trekker baby.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So then in my teens, in the 80s, I wanted to go into PR.
Hmm.
Not for any honorable reasons. Like it looked super exciting. This is the world that's sort of portrayed in Absolutely Fabulous and those types of things. It's the 80s and 90s. It was Thatcher's Britain. Everything was shiny and exciting, and money was sloshing around
Mhm.
for the people for whom it was sloshing around. And I thought I wanted to go into PR. And I was very fortunate through a friend of a friend of a friend. I got a summer internship, the summer between boarding school and university, to work in London in a small PR agency. And it was the most fun 6 weeks. And I knew at the end of week one that I did not want a career in PR.
So you had a fun 6 weeks and still at week 1 you said, "Absolutely not." This kinda takes me back to being in New York for a summer and going, "This was fun,
Yes.
but I know this isn't for me," you know?
So, how and why did you know it wasn't for you?
I'm I don't know, it just didn't feel right. I guess it's the best way to explain it. It was a media sales sorta opportunity, and I was just like, "This is doable, but it's not it," and I'm too early in my career to kinda settle on not it. I hadn't graduated yet or anything, so I was just like,
Yep.
"Thank you for letting me know this exists. I have gained some knowledge that I've used many, many years later, but it's not for me."
Absolutely. And so I think for me, very similarly, say that 3 times fast, um, I realized, this is fun, it's not it, and I could not have put words to it at this point. I mean, I was 17. If someone had said to me, "What are your values? What are your drivers? What is important to you?" I would have said, "Huh?"
It'd have been like cheesecake.
Yes, yes. I did not have words. It was one of those things that now is much more of a mainstream discussion. But that work, as interesting as it was, as fun as it was, in no way connected with my values. It did not connect with anything that was important to me. There was a hollowness to it for me.
Hmm.
Now, the PR that I was doing, and by doing, I mean companioning as a 17-year-old intern who scarcely knew one end of a typewriter from the other, um, was consumer driven PR. We were representing florists and super high end consumer goods and things like that. It was delightful, but frivolous.
Hmm. I get it.
And And I am many things, but I am not frivolous. I hope I am occasionally delightful, but I am not frivolous. And this simply didn't connect with me. And I have a number of friends now who work in PR who do really important mission based work that's driven by incredibly deep values and connects on a much more profound level. And maybe if I'd been doing that, then PR would be for me. But buy this thing instead of this thing, that was not for me.
Mhm.
But it was really fun finding out that it existed. I went to parties at 17 that I've never been to since. Um, but that was the second, yeah, not for me. I think the really important piece, and it sounds like we have this in common, the experiences that teach you what you don't want are at least, if not more than valuable as the ones
Yes.
that teach you what you do want.
Yeah. Now, what you don't want, I think, is so much more informative than actually getting what you want sometimes, because you don't even appreciate getting what you want if you have never had the other things.
Yes. Yeah. So one of my dirty secrets is that I am a huge fan of country music.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What's your favorite song right now?
Oh, right now I am on a huge Eric Church kick
Okay.
where I think it's called there's a song called Springsteen that I've had on repeat in the car on the weekend because we had beautiful weather and I have a car with a big sunroof, so I was torturing the people around me as I sang along tunelessly, really enjoying
That's the
this.
only way to do it when you drive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when we first moved to America, I lived in Birmingham, Alabama. That is the only time that I will practice my bad American accent. Um, and my son was born there. And Birmingham, like a lot of cities in the States, particularly cities in the South, like you have to have a car, you drive a lot.
Yes.
Um, and there was a lot of very aggressive rap music on the radio that I did not want to be listening to with a child who was learning to speak because this was not the vocabulary set that I really wanted him to absorb. He had no filter at this point of like, I'll say those words, I won't say those words. So we listened to a lot of country music in the car. I promise there's a point to this story. And I love story songs. I love like being able to sing along. And there's this amazing song about thanking God for unanswered prayers.
Hmm.
And I've thought about this a lot in my career where like the thing that I really thought I wanted was not the thing that I needed.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate enough to get the thing that I needed, even if it really annoyed me at the time because I wanted the thing that I wanted. But there's been a lot of grace in those unanswered prayers. There's been a lot of good learning and professional development.
Lots.
The things
Lots.
I didn't get.
Yeah, or as God has kindly reminded me, this is not punishment, it's preparation. I said, okay.
I like that. I'm borrowing that. Um, Another friend of mine uses a phrase from church sometimes in our committee gatherings where she says, "I'd like to praise and encourage you around this." Yep, you've just been praised and encouraged into doing this work.
Like to praise and encourage you.
Mm,
I like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
hot. So we've talked about your goal of becoming an archaeologist as a kid and how sometimes people say the wrong thing. You talked about your love of country music. Um, you've had a amazing career so far. What advice would you give someone interested in becoming a founder of a company?
Oh, okay. So the first thing I would say is sort of odd advice. Decide if it's your goal or someone else's goal.
No, that's great advice. This is great advice. I think sometimes we get so hung up on, well, I should do this or be this, and my family expects. Well, you have to go, what do I expect? What
Yes.
do I need?
Yes.
Otherwise, it's a very long, miserable journey.
Absolutely. So, in some ways, founder is a little bit of a funny title for me to have chosen. I chose it because it is, in a phrase that I'm sure you've heard me use before, it's one that I like a lot, specific but spacious. So it
Mhm.
means something. It says, I founded this. It's my flag in the sand. But it also means absolutely nothing. Because what one founder does and another founder does and another founder does is completely different. You mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation, sort of when are we going for venture capital? How are we doing this? When are we doing our Series A? When are we doing our et cetera, et cetera? I'm never doing any of those things. I I became the founder of a company to get closer to doing the work that I love,
Hmm.
not further away. If you stay in house, as you get more and more senior, whether you're a technical professional or a supporting professional,
Mhm.
you often get further away from the work you love, the clients you care about. I didn't want to manage other people doing the work I love any longer. I wanted to do that work. So I founded my own company. You need to know if it's your dream or someone else's dream. Only do it if it's your dream. If you're really good at what you do, especially at a time where entrepreneurship is very fashionable, people
Mhm.
will say to you, you should go out on your own. Key questions to ask yourself. What's my risk tolerance?
Yes.
Now, it might surprise you to know that actually my risk tolerance is really low.
Hmm.
So I prepared and prepared and prepared. And that meant financial preparation and savings in the bank. That meant social preparation. I was confident in not just my skill set, but my reputation for my skill set.
Hmm.
And I was confident because I asked people with whom I was not friends.
Mm.
Your friends will tell you you're a rock star.
Of course they will. You need the people that don't like you so much.
Yeah. You need the people who aren't invested in you feeling good, because that's a different conversation. Don't get caught up in false progress. So, fiddling around with a logo and a website and all that stuff, that is not starting a business.
Amen.
Selling something, that is starting a business. Test your product. Check there's a market for your product. I say there's a really wide spectrum of things that I'm interested in. There's a narrower spectrum of things I'm good at. There's a much narrower spectrum of things I am differentiatedly good at.
Hmm.
And then there's the things of which I am differentiatedly good and people will give me money.
And
That's
that is
the
the key. It's
business.
not a business if you can't sell anything. It's a great idea.
Yeah. I am differentiatedly good at packing a car for someone to go to college or on a road trip.
Huh.
I can play three-dimensional Tetris like no one else.
Wow.
No one will give me money for that. That is not a business. That
Yeah.
is a favor you do people in August.
Is a look, bye, I'll miss you.
Yeah. See ya. Congratulations. You have your whole life in here and you can still see out of the back window of your car. Not a business. I talk to a lot of people who have great fun ideas.
Mhm.
They're not businesses. So
Exactly.
test it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Making sure that you want this and not someone else telling you should do it. Being very clear about having an actual product or service that you can sell. Otherwise, it's just a glorious hobby. Being very clear about what is going to differentiate you in the marketplace so that you can position yourself to make the sale.
Yeah.
Those are some critical and really good points for people who are interested in founding a company. Like you said, don't get lost in a website or a logo. Those don't make you any money.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, and I'm going to use a dirty word here, sales. If you do not want to sell, if you are not willing to ask people for money in exchange for your labor, please do not start a company.
No truer words have been spoken. If you were uncomfortable with sales, if it's a dirty word,
Yeah.
good luck. You
Yeah.
should probably.
Yeah. Because you
Oh,
need marketing skills, you need business development skills, you also need sales courage. And
sales
without it, you
courage.
don't have a business.
Can you tell me more about what sales courage looks like? How do you develop that if it's a possible thing you can develop?
Oh, it's a possible thing to develop because I've had to develop it. Um, that most important uncomfortableness that I talked about for last year, I went and did a bunch of sales training.
Oh, wow.
There's true confessions for you for year 3 of being in business. And if any of your viewers are interested, message me. I'll tell you who I worked with. She's fantastic.
Okay.
She doesn't let you off the hook. Um, and it was horrible, but brilliant at
And it
the
was
same
horrible.
time. Horrible and brilliant simultaneously. So, what does sales courage look like? It means staying out of your buyer's head
Huh.
and staying out of your buyer's wallet. It is not up to me to choose if someone else can afford this. So, to put this in really consumer terms, because there's a lot of people who understand this at a very consumer level rather than at a business level, because some of us never make business procurement decisions, we make personal procurement decisions.
Yes.
Neither Target nor Prada care what you can afford. They are not pricing for what you can afford. They are pricing to reflect the value they bring to their ideal client. Because they know what their ideal client needs and they know the value they bring.
Right. And if you value it, you will pay for it. You'll find a way.
Yes. I think
That's
a huge challenge around professional development, for example, because a lot of the work that I do falls into the professional development category, is we have a very bewildered marketplace. We have people who have not paid for their own professional development since college.
mm-hmm.
Maybe they paid for it at college. Maybe their parents paid for it at college if they were incredibly fortunate. Maybe they took out a student loan. But they didn't stop and think, what am I paying for? What am I getting out of it? Why am I spending this money?
Yes.
And then you have I spent $125 to go to a luncheon program where you're paying for 3 things. You're paying for lunch, you're paying for networking,
Yes.
and you're paying for some learning. But it's not professional development in that pure sense. And then you have the internet, which has trained us to free content and to this cost me $27 and it's worth something.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different from working with an executive coach, going to an intensive program. And so we've got this whole education around pricing to do. If we're educating around pricing, we've already lost. So to go back to your question about sales courage, if you don't believe in the value of what you're selling, good luck selling it. And that's equally true whether you're operating as a founder or a solopreneur, where you are selling essentially yourself and the clock on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
or whether you're doing in-house business development.
That
So
is
you've been
very
in-house
true.
business development for a long time. As you know, what's been easiest for you to sell in-house?
Our services are easy. Like, I mean, people are looking for them. We've got the RFP. We answer. I mean, not just the mail, obviously, but really take a moment and do the business development work to understand. Okay, what are the real pain points behind this decision that the RFP's even been issued? Let's speak to those things so we can get shortlisted and have additional conversations.
And you genuinely believe that you slash your company
Hmm.
good at what you do.
Exactly. We are. And that's what keeps me in the saddle every day going, okay, look, let's get it done. The deadline is
Yep.
ticking.
And so, peculiarly, a key part of sales courage is knowing when to walk away.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. And
Yeah. If you're ever at a marketer's gathering and you feel like the energy's gone out of this room, how am I going to get people overexcited? Ask the question, how does your company handle go, no go? And then
yes.
back away.
That's a hot topic any day.
Any day, every day.
Any day.
I have gained more trust by knowing when to say no, by
Hmm.
knowing when people reach out to me and say, we're looking for someone who does X. Is that you? If it's not me, if it's not really me, if it's one of those things that's out on the periphery of me, saying, no, that's not me, but you should call these three people. And
Yes,
here's
that
why.
I feel like that's the best way to do business. People are always like, "Oh, I can do it." Like, but if you know that your acquaintance that you met 6 months ago is like the rock star in this area, send them to that person because you build a relationship regardless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, sales courage, stay out of the wallet, know when to say no, believe in what you're selling, and have a process. Track it, keep it alive, have a process.
Smart, have a process. So, one more, well, I've got maybe two more for you. What do you wish you knew before embarking on this path?
So much.
So much.
um, so, something I learned really quickly, and again, I mean, I never say to my parents, you should watch this, but I might say to my parents, you should watch this because I'm going to say, I've said nice things about my mom. I'm going to say some really nice things about my dad. So, my dad was an engineer.
Mhm.
He was a very, very good engineer. He was then someone from whom I learned this, you can move to great heights in your career, but be more distant from the work that you love. So he became a very senior manager and he's a really good businessman. Um, I had some vital conversations with my father about business metrics
Huh.
that I really should have had before I started the business rather than about 3 months after I started the business.
I mean, that's still not the worst time. 3 months is not 3 years. You'll be surprised how many businesses are decades old and don't have these
Yes,
conversations.
absolutely. So to turn this into something specifically usable, if you're in-house and you're thinking about shifting to starting your own business, learn as much as you can about business metrics, utilization, multipliers, overhead.
Utilization, multipliers, and overhead.
As a solopreneur, this is the wisdom of John Simper here. As a one-man band, as he calls me, if you can get your utilization and therefore your billable hours over 50%, you are working miracles. 50% of your time goes into winning the work, managing the work, administering the work. That's not billable.
Right.
To be a little bit crass, no one pays you to pee.
They don't.
This
Not
is
as a
not
solopreneur or a
a
founder of
salaried
anything.
employee thing. It doesn't all get smeared over 40 plus hours. So you need to know what you need to bill in order to make a living. Do not take your old salary and divide it by 2080 to come up with your hourly rate. Please don't do that. Know your business numbers, preferably before you go into business. So that's the hugest thing that I wish I'd known. The other thing I wish I'd known is your friends will want to help you. Understand who has the power to help you and who doesn't. I spent so long my first year in kind, generous conversations with people who really wanted their bosses to hire me, but who had no power to make that decision.
Huh.
I wasted a lot of time in the long, slow no.
The long, slow no. That is very insightful. Not to spend time with people who are not really in a position to influence the decision maker in a very swift fashion or make the decision themselves. That's great advice.
So I
Um,
would add one thing to that.
mhm.
Spend time there, but understand that it is not sales time.
Hmm.
It may be valuable time, but it is not sales time. And if people want to know more about that, they can reach out to me. Happy to have
Okay.
that conversation. You
Okay.
need to have a well rounded network, but you also need to understand who can actually buy from you versus who fulfills other roles in your network.
Smart. Smart point there for sure. What do you enjoy most about being a founder or solopreneur?
Two things at opposite ends of the spectrum. I am a teacher at heart. I am seldom more content than when I am delivering content that I can see is landing for people.
Hmm.
When people come into a room saying, I don't understand, and leave saying, I understand, that makes me deeply content and satisfied. At the other extreme, the brainstorming, consulting, solution finding piece is what stimulates and excites me. So they are both happinesses, but
Mhm.
very different ways of finding joy in the business. And I'm very fortunate that I have both.
That's awesome. That you've got two ways that like really light you up and you get to be doing this every day. That's
Yeah.
that's phenomenal. So is there anything that I have not asked you that you'd like to share?
So I think actually what I'd like to share is not something about me so much as something a little bit about you, which maybe puts you on the spot a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'm here for it.
So I'd like to share something that I really admire and that I think is visible to some of your audience who knows you really well, but perhaps not visible to everyone. And I want to shine a spotlight on it. Many of us reach points in our careers where our responsibilities and our passions are out of sync with each other. You can get frustrated, you can get resentful, or you can say, I'm going to carve out a space to get those passions developed, fed, and have it build back into my responsibilities. We've sort of known each other peripherally in the industry for quite a long time, sat around
Mhm.
various different things, particularly when you were up in the DMV area,
Mhm.
which is not the Department of Motor Vehicles,
No.
DC, Maryland, Virginia. Um, and when we reconnected during the pandemic, it's been one of my pandemic pleasures is having these one-on-one conversations. I think you were at a place where what you wanted and what you needed, what you were excited about, and what you knew you had to do were maybe out of sync. And unless
Mhm.
the person would have sulked, unless the person would have got frustrated and stomped around the block and gone back to doing the same thing. And I've watched you find ways to nurture your passions while building your skill set in your core professional responsibilities. And it's been really exciting.
Oh, well, thank you.
More people should do this. More people should realize, hey, I have this thing that gets me excited. I can't make it my whole thing yet, but I can make it some of it. So I'm going to share an example that has actually become more clear to me about my career watching what you've done. I've said 1,000 times, I love teaching. In my last in-house role, I was with a really phenomenal community architecture firm. Look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see where it is. Our marketing team needed to better educate our internal stakeholders about what we did. I'm a teacher. So we started a monthly marketing lunch and learn where we taught people what we did. We built their level of investment in what we did. And over time, we moved the needle on how the marketing department was perceived.
Wow.
I wanted to teach. I didn't want to go off and become a teacher. So I found a place to teach that was of value to my organization inside my organization. What do you want? What does your context need? How can you add those things together?
Wow. Trying to find a way. Well, I have super enjoyed the conversation with you. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me at Joanna at resoluteconsulting.co. .co, stupidest advice I ever took from a web developer, but it is what it is. Your muscle memory will make you type .com. It won't reach me. I love connecting. If you reach out on LinkedIn, and you and I have talked about this,
Yeah.
please don't just send me a random connection. I'm not going to connect with you because we don't know each other yet. Send
Yes.
me a message. Give me a context. Let's have a conversation. I like that.
Yes.
That would be lovely. This has been a treat. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing this. I've really enjoyed watching other episodes. You've got such an amazing cross section of people here.
I'm having so much fun, and people were like, "Do you only interview women?" I was like, "No, that's just who I know." So if there are men that are interested, like I'm keeping the door open to just talk to a variety of people because I think that people think about their careers in such linear form of okay, I get a degree, I get a job here, maybe in millennial land you spend 2 or 3 years someplace, and maybe if you're a different demographic, maybe it's 10, but you have this idea of okay, I work my way up the ladder. Well, what I've learned, and I feel like a lot of people have shared in their stories, is the ladder doesn't quite look like what we think it does. Kind of zigzags, and sometimes it's horizontal, and sometimes it's down instead of up. But you
Yep.
you learn how to manage that process, and so I've been enjoying these conversations because I get to kind of peek in and see other people's worlds.
One of the best analogies that I've heard is it's not a ladder, it's a jungle gym.
Oh, I like that. It is definitely a jungle gym.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Keep finding joy in what you do.